Hello and welcome to the Powerful Personal Brand Podcast, where my guests and I share tips to help and inspire you to build a great personal brand to increase your visibility and authority. I am your host, Claire Bahn, and on today's episode, I am very excited to be joined by Katrina Xavier. Katrina is the founder and CEO of Blitz Marketing, an influencer marketing agency that focuses on marketing for luxury brands. She started her career in politics, doing crisis communications and press for several high-profile government members. Katrina, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you here.
Excited to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So, you probably didn't know this, but I actually got a degree in government, and I graduated from UT Austin. And my first foray was an internship at the Texas House of Representatives. So when so I've been actually very kind of excited to be able to talk to you, because I literally I kind of had this had a fatalistic kind of view of okay, if I get a job in this, then I'm gonna stay in Texas and do government, and if not, I'm moving to New York. So basically, I moved to New York. So it didn't happen, and so it's just I'm kind of as I didn't know what to do, and I'm like, you know what, we're just gonna let the universe decide.
Sometimes letting the universe decide does result in some interesting avenues that come up that are so worth it. And you couldn't have connected the dots beforehand. So
I mean, had I not moved to New York, well, my husband always thinks that that we would have met regardless, but I met him in New York. So, I think it was meant to be.
Absolutely.
So I would love to know how you went from government communications to opening your own influencer marketing agency.
Okay. Well, it was quite the hiatus, just because I went into university idealistic and excited and going to change the world, because I came from a background, right? It's exactly filled with excitement, filled with all that I could change in the world, and I was going to make a real difference.
Yeah.
And so right after university, I graduated with economics and politics, and then luckily got a job in politics, hustled my way through, made sure, got in front of the right people, and then ended up in a very tumultuous position under a mayoral candidate at the time that had some questionable endeavors that were coming out in the media. So because of those, I was able to navigate a number of positions, because 11 people were fired the day I started. It was exciting. It was exhilarating. The entire time I was fight or flight. And you go through this whole process, and you're really you get in front of a lot more doors that way when you take a risky position. And I was able to change some legislation, get involved on the policy framework as well as the communications front. But after moving through multiple members' offices, I decided at the end that, was I really making a difference? Was I having the impact that I wanted? I had a bit of a existential crisis where I was like, is this it? Is this what I was meant for? And then I decided to quit. I ran away to the other side of the country, found yoga and found spirituality, and then attended a number of conferences in Amsterdam and across the world, and then found something called the Next Web. And then during that process, I was able to connect with people who are in charge of Google's AI front, new tech advances that were coming out, Facebook's platform integrations, just kind of going through the back end. And then I realized it's a real way to communicate through the marketing technologies that are out there right now. And then decided to start Blitz Marketing. And then as I was going through what every agency owner does, where you offer every piece of marketing that you can in the beginning, we ended up niching into influencer marketing because I prefer the authenticity piece that came with it.
Nice.
And so that's a bit of my navigation.
One of my first jobs, I was doing financial services in New York. So I was working at a financial services firm, doing PR for them. And the urgency that everything had, and I'm like, they're not curing cancer. I'm not feeling any joy in this, you have to have some joy in it for whatever you're doing. You have to find something in it. Otherwise you're like, I hate this. So,
and when it's taking you longer to do an item because there's no passion in it, and the creativity is so required for so many things that if you're not passionate, you can't pull on those resources mentally.
Yeah. So you literally found this so were you an influencer at the time? Like how?
So at the time, no, I was not. I was just an extremely curious nerd. To put it blankly. And then by going into saying yes to the universe, basically, and saying yes to every opportunity from incubators to think tanks I had a year gap that I had given myself to go through everything and say yes to everything from app development to marketing to product development, and really get my hands into everything. And then I found that I really was passionate about social media and the ability to enact the change that I truly wanted within politics. And at that point, then I started my own social media journey. And then as I grew my following, I realized, there's a way to connect other humans who are really doing a good job with brands. And so that connecting that authenticity piece and that alignment piece of making sure that brands are aligned with who's communicating about them is what we've kind of prioritized at Blitz.
I mean, because you kind of hit a couple of things, and what's actually interesting is I don't really get into politics, my personal life or on my platform. I mean, I think that a true person that's been there, you're like, no, we don't
not going to touch that one.
Well, and I don't really care what spectrum anyone is really on. I am just kind of like, I love all people.
It's also
like
fluid.
You're that kind of person.
It's constantly changing.
Yeah. And I feel like I see a lot of, especially we're going into an election, you see a lot of people doing stuff wrong, right? Because in social media, because you talked about authenticity and politics and authenticity often do not go hand in hand. I mean, so what do you, I mean, what are you kind of seeing? I'm gonna put you a little on the spot. Like, do you think like the people that are like literally truly authentic, are they rising to the top, or are people that are good at faking it, or both? What's your feeling on that?
I think it's a combination. In the current marketplace, I think people have seen enough that they've started to trust their intuition a bit more and can suss out when something is fake news to some extent. But then at the same time, people have gotten really, really good at faking it. And so there's a crisis of consciousness in this framework where people, inauthentic talent or inauthentic influencers, whether it's a politician, that's an influencer, or a person in their home connecting with their viewers, if they're inauthentic, it stands out now with the platforms on the back end. And so oftentimes you won't see the engagement and you won't see the views and you won't see the notoriety and the actual impact that they have if it's fake, which is nice to see because there was a period of time that people could fake it and grow. But now I think people are a little bit more cognizant of fake and they're looking for real. And real is trending, trending a bit more than fake is. So it's a mental mind game where now people who want to fake it have to pretend to be real to get audiences. So therefore they're real. It's weird. It's a weird moment that we're living in.
No, it's what's interesting because I mean, a lot of times we'll deal with clients and sometimes, or even consultations with my co-founder, and people will be very fixated. Like we've gotten into dialing into what are you actually after, and when they're after like lead gen, they're so focused on I need to make money, I need an ROI, I need to make money, I need to make money that like it just permeates everything. That authenticity of I truly want to help people I want to build my personal brand and become a thought leader. Like you can, it's not authentic. You can literally kind of just be like, something's off.
Yeah, because they're not solving a pain point. They're solving their own pain point, which is financial gain. Yeah. And so there's a short-term evaluation and a long-term evaluation with brands. And oftentimes when people come into us, I can suss out when someone is so short-run focused that they need to take a step back and actually make a plan. Because if they just institute the short run, they're going to run out of capital so quick, it's it's beyond anyone's capacity of solving for them.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, a lot of times, there's just no helping those people until they figure out that there's a problem, and they finally come back and they're like, oh,
Yes. And the biggest point is to always keep in mind that even when you're creating a product or creating anything, you're creating it for someone, and you just need 1,000 of those someones to buy from you at $1,000 of like lead runway in order to make $1 million, right?
Yeah.
So within that framework, sell to quality, not sell to masses.
I remember I was kind of very early on doing personal branding, and I was speaking to somebody and very fixated on me, kind of like figuring out what she was going to, figuring out what she was going to do when she grew up. I'm like, I'm never going to, I can't tell you what you're going to be when you grow up. That's not my job. But I can tell you this, that like, you need, explore what works for you and this kind of thing, but don't quit your day job. Because
the amount of people that need to not quit their day job yet.
Don't quit your day job.
Sold these concepts online where even for an influencer, people are told that you can make money quickly by being an influencer. No, any influencer who is actually worth their stuff will tell you it took them close to 5 years to actually start making the revenue enough to quit their day job. And even then, they probably kept their day job for a little bit longer to make sure that there was consistency, because there's no consistent revenue there.
No. I really kind of like, I was an actress, and then I started, one of my kind of things that I started doing is I started doing stuff. I basically had a YouTube channel where I did like a food show. And so I was doing all of that, and it kind of evolved into lifestyle. And then I started doing, influencer marketing, and it's actually funny. I'm in my, guest room, and I actually have like a Murphy bed with a bed that was sent to me because I did a activation with this company. And like, so it's like, I was really in that whole thing. And for me, it did not feel good. And obviously my business took off, but ultimately you've got to try a lot of things, and a lot of things just don't feel good. And I don't know. I feel it's such a weird thing if people aren't in tune with themselves and how they truly feel, without other people telling them how they feel. If you really think about how you are feeling, the universe and you'll get to the right thing. And right?
You have to almost do the rocking chair test, where you sit in your space and sit in a rocking chair 10 years from now or 20 years from now and envision the life you just led. And when you go through that process, then you can actually highlight some of the things that you're actually passionate about versus the noise that you've been given by popular media or concepts that you've been given in terms of finances or other things. But you can kind of peel away the noise and see what you truly are supposed to do in that framework, and then act accordingly.
But how long did it take you to get to that point? Because it seems like
a lot of tears. Let's be real here. There's a lot of moments where you question everything because there's so much commentary around you. Yeah. But oftentimes I find, for me personally, it took me about 2.5 years of going through the drawing board and test and stop it when it isn't feeling right. That's the key. You have to test multiple things, but know when to stop when something isn't in alignment. Yeah. And so trying all of those things, that was important for me.
I saw this inspirational story in the news, I think it was last week, of a 51-year-old man that just became a doctor, like a medical doctor. And he just had always dreamed of doing it, and he had a family and kids, and he had a very successful auto mechanic business. And he literally put himself through school, like at night and all these things. And he finally became a doctor because that was his dream. And he started his like residency at 47. So you literally look at that and it's sometimes I've talked with people, or I had people on the podcast, and I don't necessarily agree. I completely am in alignment with you, but I think that many people think they're like, oh, well, I'm like 30 and this person's 30, and you can't compare yourself to someone like Beyonce or something like that. You know what I mean? You haven't had their life. And I think that's a problem that I see when you see all of these influencers, or you don't know their backstory, and you don't really know all of the bumps in the road and the things that it took to get there, or truly someone that just gave them, you know, an invitation to make it easy, which happens. So I like that you're very truthful with what it took, because I sometimes think that people aren't. And that kind of irks me.
There's two concepts that have really resonated with me over time through this little journey that I've been on. Is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is right now. So if you are going to start something, you have a passion, whenever it comes, just be ready to run with it. Because the universe will put it in your path, whether you're 90 or 20. It does not matter. It does not change anything, because it's the consistency and the ability to run with it that's important.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is the iceberg effect. You only see the top of the iceberg, but you don't know how big the struggle was underneath it. And so everyone has their own iceberg, and we are only privy to the top tiny little piece that we see. Yeah. We have no idea what someone went through underneath it.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of fear in all of that, the fear of the unknown. So yeah, do it. Find your support system. I think that's like so key. Do you have a big support system that helped you through? Good. Yeah,
I have two pieces that have worked really well for me. One, a really wonderful partner, and family. One thing my mom always told me, she was a single mom, so bringing me up was quite difficult, but she did it.
I had a single mom too.
With exuberance, and she provided me with so much direction that was phenomenal. Yeah. She always said, don't be afraid to jump as high as you want, because I'll always be there to catch you. So that was important. I could always test in every direction that I wanted. And then the other piece that was phenomenal is being able to be honest with people around me. When something wasn't working, I was able to say, hey, this is failing. Can someone help me troubleshoot this?
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of us are afraid of.
A lot of people don't ask for help or ask questions. Yeah. For me, I feel like my mom, she got very, very ill. She died 16 years ago at this point. And it was her getting really sick that was like, what am I waiting for? Being unhappy. You know?
And oftentimes in our lives, we need something that was a fire that resulted in who you are now, which is phenomenal. And I have that fire barking at me daily, and it's amazing. Yeah. Like, no matter what country she's in, she will find me and bark at me, and it's amazing. Like whenever I need that extra push of like, you can actually do it. I call my mom. Yeah.
It's so funny because like my husband calls it like my inner like bulldog. It's kind of like when I kind of am like, no, I'm like, I know I need to do this, and nothing's going to stop me.
But that's what creates things in the world, that energy, and channeling that energy into whatever it is. Like, I think oftentimes people don't put their 100% into something, and then they wonder why it didn't work. Yeah.
This has been such a, this conversation has been so much fun. I do want to ask you kind of, because, you know, you came from the political realm. What are the two things that you would say that if you're building your personal brand for political purposes, what are two things you should avoid?
Thinking that you know all the answers as a brand owner. Consult people who know what they're doing. It'll save you a lot in the long run. There's no place for ego in building. And when you're building,
I think that goes for anyone building a brand.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's political or,
anything at all.
Yeah.
Put your ego aside and run with it. You do not need to be the smartest person in that room.
Yeah.
It actually shows a lot more to the general public, especially in politics, if you have people who are authority figures around you consulting you on how to best build your brand.
Right. Well, sorry. You know, I heard something recently that was talking about how like the loudest people are the ones that actually don't know what they're doing, and the ones that are kind of retrospect, like, you know, a little, they're thinking and they're listening are actually the smartest ones.
Always. I've seen it so many times. I've been in the room, and anyone who walks in with that swagger and acts like they know everything is the most insecure person in the room, and they need a moment And so you always look for the person who's well seasoned because they will be quiet. And at the end, they will leave you with so many golden nuggets in one sentence. And that's all they had to do to basically blow your mind.
Yeah. Listening. It's so important.
It's key. It's very key. And then when it comes to building brands, the biggest takeaway I would say is oftentimes you hear people say copying a brand that is like a competitor, copying their marketing methods is actually going to work. No, it doesn't. Every brand's unique and your avatar that you're going after is unique. So devise a plan, have a plan, and then run with it.
I do think it's important, though, to see what your competitors are doing, to know what works, what's not working.
To evaluate, but every 5 minutes, platforms are changing and things are changing. Yeah. So if you come in saying, oh, Facebook ads are going to work for me right now, you don't know what the landscape is, and you don't know whether they instituted them 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and what the actual tangibles that you can take away from it are.
Yeah. Oh, ads. Oh, goodness.
I know. Everyone cringes when they feel everyone's talk to an AI, like basically as a person and troubleshooted an ad before every single one of us.
It's just,
and then you realize you're speaking to a piece of tech to convince them to let your ad go through. It's a concerning moment.
I know. It's always so frustrating. What do you think that, like, what are some key things that you tell the influencers that you work with, like when they're kind of building their brands? How are the influencer brand building? How is it different than kind of like political brand building?
Absolutely. So when you're becoming an influencer, the biggest thing that I tell them is remember that you have to have influence. So you're building trust and you're building an audience. And so any creator that is saying in the beginning that they're just going in with the intention of making money, this is not the platform for you. If you have something you have to say or something that you are nurturing, then you will build an authentic audience. And that's what you should be passionate and driving towards. And that's a big one. And then the same kind of goes for politics as well. Politicians don't do it for anything like monetary based because you don't make a lot as a politician. And then number 2, don't go for ego. So really, if you have a platform that you're building in terms of clean air or lobbying an item that is so passionate towards you, then you will be successful because you will find your community.
Yeah. Authenticity is like one of the biggest keys, but it's one of the things that I don't think a lot of people understand.
Yeah. It's kind of a buzzword right now.
Yeah.
And it's overused in a lot of categories, and defining it is difficult with a lot of different groupings just because what does it really mean to be authentic? And if you're saying that you're authentic publicly, then are you really authentic or you are just touting it? Like there's layers to this concept that you can really dive deep into.
Yeah. It's funny because like sometimes you hear people talk and they're like, oh, I don't judge and I'm never judgmental. And you're like, why'd you even bring it up?
It's impossible to do that.
but you know what I mean? Like if they're like, oh, I'm authentic. I'm the most authentic person. You're just like, why are you bringing it up unless you doubt it or you're not, or you're faking it? Or it's an interesting thing.
It's an interesting thing to unpack with people too, because it also flares ego right away. So it's this beautiful process to navigate the concept of it.
Yeah. I actually had a very interesting experience recently, and I'm like, hope no one that was involved is listening to this podcast. But anyway, but I had two different dinners that I did. One that was so uncomfortable. The people were not authentic. And it was kind of like, oh, you did that. Well, I did this. Well, you did that. And I did this. And I'm like, ugh. And then I told similar stories. But it was, the people were not listening to any of the stories, and I was trying to listen, but it was just not a fun evening. The next night I went to a dinner party and I told the same stories, and people they explored things with me and kind of layered their kind of things that happened to them. And it was a wonderful time. And I'm like, so interesting, because I was kind of like, oh, if I tell the same stories, I wonder how these are going to, land here. And like, people laughed at my stories, because usually people laugh at my stories because I try to entertain. I mean, it's kind of like going back to my acting days. And it was so interesting when you kind of deal with people and personalities, and you don't know what's going on up here, but yeah, it's just so crazy. I love that sometimes, like, not
sitting
really
in that energy after something there's a transference of like honesty and integrity and that openness. And then sitting in that energy afterwards is phenomenal. There's kind of an ick to the energy of being in a closed room versus an open room. And being able to facilitate those open rooms is so difficult, but also so important for us as humans.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the difficult rooms are very difficult.
I think people also are a bit more, they're on shaky ground because of the way the world works right now. Everything is kind of built on a bit of a house of cards. And so getting people to open up is proving to be a bit more difficult than it would have been in the past, because they're afraid of being canceled, or some kind of exposure, or social media going viral about them. And there's so many pieces that they're working with. Yeah. There's like a bit of an insecurity that's kind of resonating with people right now that I would love to see that change.
Right.
I would love the openness to come back a bit more.
I feel like, wouldn't it be interesting to kind of see the parallel universe of what it would be like if we were essentially like back in the 90s or back in like the 80s, where we didn't have all this social media. You didn't know what all the things, you weren't constantly, I mean, everyone always had keeping up with the Joneses, but they lived next door to you. You weren't keeping up with like 80 different people going like, I didn't go on a vacation. I didn't do these things. So what would it look like? I feel like people would be happier.
Because I think there was a deeper sense of joy that was present before, whereas now there's always this competitive element, because we are humans. We do compare ourselves to our neighbors. That is a marketing tactic that has been used for generations. Yes. But now your neighbor pool has extended to someone in the UK or someone completely on the other side of the world, driving around in some luxury car that you didn't think that you needed, but now you do. And in order to prove your worth, you're trying to assimilate into their environment. But what people don't realize is by being you and taking away all of that stuff, you're actually more likely to grow an audience and build your tribe. Yeah.
I mean, do you ever work with, like, when you're working with the influencers, do you ever kind of have to deal with that? Like, kind of trying to get them to, weirdly enough, step away from the platform sometimes, kind of for their mental health?
So it's interesting the way we work. Oftentimes with the influencers, we partner them with brands. So we aren't on the building the influencer side as much.
Got it.
Just because every 5 minutes a creator is changing and their landscape's changing, and the way their audience is engaging is completely different, and every brand is different. But one thing we've noticed is when content comes in for approval, there are moments where we can suss out right away where something wasn't in alignment, and we may need to repartner with a different creator that is a little bit more in line with being authentic to what they want. Like if they aren't likely to use that product, maybe we shouldn't be working with that product. Maybe we'll find them something else that's a bit more in alignment. Yeah. And then making sure that both pieces are there, where the brand is getting someone who's an actual avatar and the influencer is getting a brand that speaks to them properly.
Yeah. That's
a
so
whole
key.
There's like 48 points of contact per influencer. Like it's a whole gambit of like kind of navigating that entire landscape, because it's very hard to find someone that is in alignment. But once you do, roll with that. Create multiple engagement pieces.
Yeah. So I always like to leave the audience with kind of 3 tips. What are 3 tips that you can give the audience?
In terms of building their brand?
Yeah. I mean, like based on your expertise. So if you were like, building a brand to influence, essentially. Absolutely. What are 3 tips that you would give?
Tip number 1, think long-term. Consistency is key. You're in it for a long period of time, and do not look for reasons to quit. Look for reasons to engage more than anything. And if you need to take a break in that, take a break, but come back consistent. Number 2 is know what you are solving. Have a problem that you're solving, whether it's nutritious meals for people, or it is mom solutions, or style solutions. Know the pain point that you're solving. If it's political, clean air. If it's environmental, if it's like anything, always look for what you're solving. Because if you aren't solving something for people, why are you doing it? Because it's a selfless act to put your content out there and to really communicate with people. You have to put yourself in a selfless position to be able to engage with them properly. And the third thing, it's not about the money. The money will come, but it's about what you're putting out there. Always.
I love that. I feel like the last two are so important because everyone is always so concerned with, a lot of people are concerned, I will say, with the ROI and how much things cost and that sort of thing. If they're always very concerned, they're like, I want to share this information. I want to do these things. And it's like, it's not about you. What problems are you solving? Who are you helping? Go and help somebody.
If you help 10 people, those 10 people will go tell another 10 people, and then you will have 20 clients. Like, it's very, very simple.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Katrina. It was such a great conversation, and it's so many things to kind of unpack that we unpacked, and so many things to take away, right? Authenticity is so key. Go find your authenticity, take time, all that sort of stuff. I absolutely love this. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for listening and watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.